May 16th meeting minute. They were amended about a half an hour ago to include George Fabianis as being in attendance. Is there any discussion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Oh, okay.
Second. All right, hang on. I need to just check who's online.
So we have John Finizio, Catherine Bond, Sarah Carroll.
Yeah.
Yes. David Rose a lot.
Okay.
They keep switching around.
Dennis.
Goodness.
Okay. All right. So Mrs. Bond,
Aye.
Ms. Simon,
Aye.
Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
Ms. Kasha,
Aye.
Mr. Cuna.
Yes.
Mr. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblatt,
Yes.
Ms. Priest,
Aye.
and John Lyons,
John's on.
Mr. Lyons.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so. 10-0-0. Yeah. Our next agenda item is the school building committee member update. Mr. Lyons, would you mind introducing the folks you'd like to add?
I'm just at the emergency room right now,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I'm
I'll
just
do it.
typing in on the meeting.
No problem, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So Mr. Lyons selected the school building committee members in the same manner as Mr. Rosenblatt selected the Fox Hill building committee members. So he is adding Margot Bunker as the parent and Amanda Hannafin and Melissa Gilbert as teachers. Margot, Ms. Bunker will be a voting member. Do you have any motions?
I move to add Margot Bunker as a Pine Glen parent to the school building committee as a voting member.
Second.
Discussion. All right. Mrs. Bond,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
Mr. Kasha,
Aye.
Mr. Cuna,
Yes.
Mr. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblatt,
Yes.
Mrs. Priest,
Aye.
Mr. Lyons. And I am yes, so we have one. So 9 for 1 abstention, so 9-0-1. Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion to add Amanda Hannafin and Melissa Gilbert as who are Pine Glen teachers to the school building committee.
I'll second.
All right, Ms. Bond,
Aye.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Mr. Brooks,
Aye.
Kasha,
Aye.
Mr. Cuna,
Yes.
Mr. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblatt,
Yes.
Ms. Priest,
Aye.
Mr. Lyon,
Yes.
Ms. Bunker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Dr. Conti, would you like to vote on adding our Pine Glen teachers?
Yes.
How's over Chief?
So 12-0, to add the committee.
Welcome.
And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Donna for the community forum.
Everyone, welcome, officially welcome. We're great to have you here. We had a really great first community forum. Was it only last Thursday? Two Thursdays ago. Apologize, it's been one of those months. But you know, I first want to say thank you to everyone that. Oh,
Sounded like
sorry, thank you. Good night. You could have heard me back there, I'm sure you could have. But we wanted to say thank you to everyone who is participating in the process. It's really important that we understand and hear from you and understand what is important to you. So with that, I just kind of summarize the input that we received during the presentation. We understand that it's important that we continue to create flexibility for enrollment fluctuation, that maintaining the 4 elementary schools is a priority, small schools is a priority, concerns surrounding this project as it relates to traffic, wetlands, safety concerns, and then other issues and kind of items that we need to consider as we go through this process is the cost and tax implications, as well as we actually heard talking about some other potential town sites to consider as part of the process. So this is really the beginning of the conversation. Yep, you can go to the next one. And with that, we wanted to understand what the community's priorities were and the criteria that was important to you all. So we asked everyone to rank the 8 priorities that have been established by the school building committee. And we had great participation. There were over 100 people at the community forum. So thank you. And we hope that participation continues throughout the process. It's going to be a long journey. So just hoping everyone hangs out with us for the duration. But you'll see that the top priority was educational benefits to the students, which is wonderful. And that speaks volumes. All the other ones are also important. Operating costs kind of round out the bottom of the ranking, but you know, this really helps us and helps inform as we make decisions going forward. No decisions have been made. We're not planning on making any decisions anytime soon. So this is, and we're going to continue to engage and ask for the community to provide input and feedback as we move forward. For those of you who weren't at the building committee meeting, but may be watching tonight, there is a link at the bottom, and that will take you to the survey and where you can also provide your input. So the more we can hear from you and understand what the priorities are, concerns, and what excites you about this project will be great.
The chairs. Portions.
Oh, we have some expanding. The one other comment I just am going to throw out there is that someone did suggest that we take a look at Overlook Park and that there may be some other potential sites in the district for us to consider as we move forward. So just putting it out there to the building committee, to the community, if anyone is aware of other sites for us to consider before any final decisions been made, that would be super helpful. We started to look at the Overlook Park site, and we'll be circling back on the information that we're able to obtain about the size and restrictions they have, the location, how that may influence or impact the schools, Fox Hill and or Pine Glen, to where it's located in the town of Burlington. But we are, so if anyone knows of any other sites, we're looking to make sure that we leave no stone unturned during this process. So speaking of process, again, I just really want to make sure that I'm clear. and I apologize if I haven't been clear, but the MSBA process is very prescriptive, and we really need to follow it as prescribed by the MSBA. And we're currently in the feasibility study. We're at the beginning of that process, which is the preferred, the preliminary design program. If don't just go, oh, you did, sorry. Which really is establishing the educational program, which will then tell us their space needs, which is really important, really is fundamentally the very beginning of this whole process. We need to understand the existing conditions of the schools, of course, but you're in the MSBA program for a reason. The site information and the site attributes and constraints are very important during this phase, and we believe we understand all of the site constraints, so that's really helpful. And then we're trying to establish design parameters, and we have not evaluated everything, and we'll talk about the design criteria, the criteria matrix that we're looking at. And once we have the educational program, we can then develop and evaluate alternatives. So what we're trying to say is no decisions have been made. And if it comes across that decisions have been made, that's not accurate at all. MSBA is part of the process, is we have to look at everything from just renovating the existing school all the way to a combined 640 student school. No one is saying you have to accept any of those options or any of those options today, but that is the process. So your input is great, and it really will help us understand what the concerns are. If there are items that can be if we can improve certain situations or certain issues, that's great. And if there are preferences, that's what we want to hear. So I just want to make it explicitly clear, the ED program is the very first start in all of this. And we've been working really closely with the school department, and I thank Dr. Conti and his team for really putting a lot of effort in. So just really quickly, and then I will show you this document. It's two documents, actually. The educational program identifies all of the programs that are offered district-wide for your elementary schools. And then we talk about what programs would be offered within the new Fox Hill Elementary School. And we're looking at this holistically. This gives you an opportunity to perhaps relocate maybe one of your special ed district-wide programs, because it gives you an opportunity to bring them into some updated space that is appropriate for that program. It also allows us to identify the spatial relationships and adjacencies, meaning that you want to locate programs and sport spaces for students in the right places so we can maximize time on learning. Right? That's really important. That's our goal. And then once we understand all of that, that will define the overall gross square footage of the building, which then will help us understand what the cost is going to be for the building. And we're going to have updated costs throughout the whole process. So we do not have costs because we're confirming the educational program, which is occurring over the next week or so, which will then allow us to obtain costs. So we don't have costs. It would be almost irresponsible of us to be throwing out costs right now because we don't even know what the overall gross square footage is of the building. And then just to reiterate the level of detail that goes into the educational program, we have to develop two educational programs. MSBA has invited Burlington into their program, looking at 325 students and one looking at 640 students. So we have to develop two educational programs to demonstrate to MSBA that we've thought through how the school department would respond to both of those enrollments. We're not saying we're adopting any. We need to submit it to MSBA for them to review it and approve it, along with the square footage of the needs to meet your educational program. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but here's a list of everything that we're looking at as we look at the educational program. It's an incredibly detailed report that identifies how Burlington educates your students. Everything from teaching methodology and structure to your scheduling, understanding your teacher planning, and then of course your core, your specials, music, performing arts, PE, special education programs, and everything down to security and visual access requirements for the building. So, Dr. Conti, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I do. I just don't want people to get too far ahead of themselves. And I think what's been missing from this is building a school is an optimistic process. The state is basically saying that they're willing to invest tens of millions of dollars in our community. And but if we want them as a partner, there are certain rules that we need to follow. Some of those rules can be really frustrating. I certainly appreciate that. But that's what they're looking on. We are right now, the program piece is so critical, and I have to distill everything down so it's simple for me. And so if we're describing our art program and we do ceramics in our art program and we require a kiln as part of that program, then Donna needs to design a kiln room or a kiln space that meets all the code and does everything else. If we don't include that in our program, Donna won't design the room, it won't get reimbursed, and they won't build anything. So it's programmatic conversation should be a unifying conversation for us because we all want the best elementary program, whether it's delivered in one location, two locations, three locations, or whatever. Are we willing to push back against the MSBA? I think the answer to that is clearly yes, because we already have. When they accepted Fox Hill, saying Fox Hill needs to be replaced, the state solution was to say that all of your elementary classrooms have to have a ratio of 23:1. That's our ratio. And therefore, you can fit all of your kids in 3 buildings, and we can add more kids to Memorial, Francis Wyman, and then you can build another school. That was the state solution. We pushed back, and the state listened to us, but the pushback for us was about accepting a smaller classroom ratio. They wouldn't support a 150 student new school at 23 kids, but they said they would support a 325 student new school at 18:1, which not only was great news for Fox Hill, it also was great news for Francis Wyman and Memorial and Pine Glen, because we weren't forcing students to the higher ratio that the state was saying. But all this other stuff in terms of how we're, like, what sites and all, we have to go through that. And I would argue, because that was the state's initial solution, we have to look at this combined school. And the better job we do looking at it, the better off we can be about ignoring it or discounting it in the future. If we ignore their solution, they're not going to say we want to invest tens of millions of dollars in your community. So we have to look at that, because that idea came from them, the lower class ratio and the pushback to sort of keep a 4-school option came from the district. So that's the process. But when we're talking about program, I think it's been really exciting because we offer a great elementary program. And I think that's really what we need to do. The pathway through the program has to be through the school committee, because one of the roles and responsibilities of the school committee is to adopt program. So again, what does that mean? That if the school committee wants to offer Farsi as a language at the high school, then my job is to build a high quality Farsi program, but that would be something that we need to do. So as we were describing the program, and the documents that we used were our sort of school improvement plan, our values documents. We have a visual arts director. You may not know that, George Rakovich, again, very talented. So when we looked at the art program at elementary school, he got access. He made sure that what we were writing reflected the art program that we have. We did the same thing for the performing arts, for health and PE. And a really important one for us here is special education. We offer lots of supplemental programs for that. And when looking at this, we have to look at our programs district-wide, even though we're only talking, again, about the Fox Hill. So when we looked at Pine Glen, you all have experienced the growth in our developmental skills classroom, which is a program that we have for children with autism. It's a district-wide program, so it pulls from students all over town. That program has grown significantly. And I think next year we're going to be opening up with 5 classrooms. We're actually creating 2 classroom space. Our Ways and Means members know that was a warrant article that we asked for. What we have to be careful of with the state, because there are many state agencies besides MSBA, is we can't have a school that is solely identified as a sort of self-contained school either. We can't put all of our children with a certain disability under one roof. That is frowned upon. It's frowned upon because it doesn't reflect diversity, equity, inclusion. It doesn't mean that we're including all those kids across all of our schools in their programming. Are there appropriate times and places for district program? The answer is yes. Fox Hill doesn't have a district program, but Fox Hill has a collaborative program that's already existing there. One of my concerns is that as robust as our elementary program is, I think we need to plan for the future. This is a 50-year decision in my head. And so what we'd like to petition the MSBA is for them to accept, because I believe it's not going to be too far into the future where we may need 6 developmental skills classrooms, that we look at dividing our developmental skills program in 2. And we can do that a number of different ways with some of the expertise that's sitting next to me and at the central office. But we would look to ask the MSBA to accept 3 of those classrooms, a district program, which Fox Hill currently does not have, under the Fox Hill roof. Even if we weren't building Fox Hill and that program continued to expand at Pine Glen, I think teachers will tell you there's no more room at Pine Glen. And we wouldn't want to have all of that program located there anyway. So we'd have to relocate this program anyway, which is why I hope MSBA will accept this. So we can't go to MSBA and say something like this. We don't have any preschool classrooms at Fox Hill currently, nor a history of preschool classrooms, but we want you to include 8 preschool classrooms in the new design and pay for them, because we think at some point in the future, we may need a preschool. They're going to say, good for you for preschool, but we're not going to give you any money, or we might not even include it as part of the project. So that's why the program part of this is so critical, because we're going to be talking about many different things. Yes, where the programs are located, absolutely. We have to do a really rigorous job looking at a combined school as well as separate schools. But I think the next step here, the programmatic step, is critical to make sure the space that we are talking about is reflective of our program, and that MSBA accepts that program as being part of the project and therefore reimbursable. There may be things that we want to add. We've talked about something as simple as a gym, where we may want an additional 1,000 square feet for more runoff space, because if we want to host, we have gym space crunches in the wintertime for basketball. So if our freshman team wants to practice, let's say at the new school, they may need more runoff space. That may be a cost that the town wants to take on or not. But I'm saying that's all going to be part of the programmatic discussion. Donna, you talked about there's STEM spaces that are newly sort of made available. We need to talk about a STEM program. And a lot of the spaces are very common to everybody, but a lot of the spaces don't currently exist. So I think what's sometimes missing from our conversations is, if we're talking about OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, if we're talking about tutor spaces, a lot of times we're putting those folks in closets or repurposed offices or other spaces. The MSBA is going to say no to that. They're going to want them to have fully inclusive spaces. And in general, the more specialized the student population, the lower the class size restrictions that we have. So for instance, for our developmental skills classroom, we have restrictions in terms of where the classrooms can be located. They can't be off to the side. They can't necessarily be smaller, but we have restrictions as to the number of kids that can be in those classrooms. We also have restrictions as to the age differential that those kids can be. There can only be so many months between those kids. So it may be that we can fit 25 kids. I know that's not Burlington, but in, say, a part of my history, there were elementary classrooms with 25 kids in them, We may have the same exact size classroom, but be restricted to 8, 9, or 10 because of the particular student population that we have. So the building's just gonna have a lot different feel. So please, 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 we have lots of things to discuss and worry about, but what is in front of us is the program, and I would say that to everybody here. And MSBA has to actually, well, the school committee has to vote to say, this is our program, but MSBA actually has to accept that program. If they don't accept the program, that means that they're not gonna support the space being part of the building, and they're not gonna support funding that space. So, that's kind of right where we are. Donna, the deadline for that, or Steve, I know you told me Memorial Day was a critical weekend. I think we both worked. When is the MSBA board meeting where that's going to?
So MSBA, this is, well, it's sort of an internal review. I also just would like to point out that DOE, Department of Education, and the DESE, it's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they actually review your educational program, so it's not within MSBA itself. So they do review and comment and weigh in and say what would be appropriate or inappropriate, especially as it relates to location and size of spaces. So,
What? I know, and it might be a good time for breaks for me to stop talking for a minute.
Yeah.
I just need to run the athletic banquet. I'll be right back.
okay.
Thank you.
So, MSBA does not have a formal deadline for this phase, for the preliminary design program. But the sooner we can get it in, the sooner we'll get their feedback back. And I think they want 6 weeks at least to review the educational program now. And then we can refine the overall size of the building once we receive MSBA's feedback. So our goal is to submit a draft educational program or an education program to school committee for June 13th review at the June 13th school committee meeting, for them to review and ask questions. And then we will come back 2 weeks later, June 26th, for final approval of the educational program to submit to MSBA. So that right now is the plan. And then we'll have that. And then as part of the preliminary design program, which we're submitting in July, we'll have, estimated gross square footages, because again, until MSBA approves this, we won't have actual square footages, but what our requested square footage would be. And then we'll be able to obtain costs, which then we'll roll out to the school building committee. And so we'll get into that in a minute. So.
Ms. Bond, I know you've had it up for a while.
Yeah, actually, it was from the previous slide, and I know we're not at the point where we're talking about cost yet because we don't have all the numbers, but I did want to make sure that, and it may be a silly thing to bring up, but as part of the cost, does it include also knocking down the old building? I was talking to somebody I know from a neighboring town where that number was not included in the total number presented, and then the town was scrambling to come up with another couple million to knock down the existing school.
So what I'd like to say is that we'll write that down and we'll respond to it. I think what we're trying to do is really just focus on the educational program right now, and then we'll be talking about cost and next steps in just a few minutes, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. I just didn't want to forget because you brought up cost on the previous slide. That's all.
Sure. The simple answer is yes, but we'll get into that. So if we want to go to the next slide, so what does that mean, right? We are starting to think about space and what does that mean? We've had lots of meetings. We've had wonderful visioning meetings with both Fox Hill and Pine Glen and central office about what's important to the district, because this is your school. We want to understand what's important to you. So what you'll see is this slide tells you the 2 enrollments we must evaluate both options: 325 students, 640 students. No one's saying one over another. We're just saying we have to put them all out there, which both will have costs and both will have cost implications to them, right? But this will tell us how many general classrooms you need per grade, and then the overall general classroom requirement for the school. So for 325 students, using your 18 students per classroom, which really, you should all be so proud of that, that you're able to maintain such low class size, that you need 18 classrooms for 325 students. 640 student enrollment, you need double that, right? 36 classrooms. So if we go to the next slide, the point being, and as Dr. Conti was stating, is that that's only part of the conversation, right? Those general classrooms do not make up an elementary school. I know we have lots of educators in the audience and here, which is great, but so much happens outside and to support the students in the general classrooms. So the core academic spaces, this is how MSBA breaks down the educational program and the components, which will be reflected in the educational program. So the core academic spaces, and when we say that, it includes your general classrooms, your science, tech, engineering classroom, your ELL program, your literacy and math specialists, and your tutors. So there's so many people that are currently in your school that don't have spaces, right? So you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, right? Where do all these people go? So the ed program is going to define the space needs. Every person that works in this school should have the appropriate space, both for themselves as an office or to support the students. You'll see the special education column or row. That is quite robust special education program. And again, you should be proud of this. You're providing the support spaces for them. This, as Dr. Conti was saying, includes the lab program that currently exists at Fox Hill. We're adding in a partial DSC program, and that includes all the other support spaces, your speech and language, learning centers, other small group reading spaces, your OT and PT, team chair, psychologist, adjustment counselor, and on and on. All of these staff currently exist. They just don't really have the appropriate places to sit. So that rounds out the special education program. Art and music are also a really important, wonderful part of your educational program. So there'll be sufficient space for art and music, independent classrooms. Music actually has practice for smaller ensemble spaces. So we'll be having those conversations about how you want to utilize that space. Health and PE, of course, you'll have a full-size gym, and that's where Dr. Conti was suggesting maybe we have a little extra space to support maybe the high school basketball programs and needs. The media center, to have a nice full-size media center with lots of windows and natural light. Dining, which includes your cafeteria, your kitchen. We've talked about elementary school. So this would be a cafeteria, and your stage would be.
Muted. I'm muted. I'm just trying to see the slide, so I'm bringing it up here.
I don't think you're muted.
No, I'm not.
I don't think you're muted.
Oh, shoot, I'm so sorry. Is it now?
So, talking about dining, you'll have a cafeteria that will support two sections of dining.
I'll just take it off.
You guys want to slide out closer to the.
I was gonna say.
We can move some chairs if that helps.
What, did you get us, how do we get a link So we can look at this after.
Yeah.
So say,
The meeting materials are all available on the website. I think this slide has been presented before, maybe not that.
It's been updated.
Yeah,
but
okay, it should be on the project website. And yeah, this will be, they're pretty speedy and getting it out.
So talking about dining, we'll have, the cafeteria will be your cafetorium, which will have a stage for assembly and performances. And the cafeteria will have sufficient space that you could actually have your school have lunch. Half the school could have lunch at one time. That probably will never happen because that's a lot of students to manage, but we want to make sure that the cafeteria or cafetorium is large enough that it would also support your full school assembly spaces. Your medical or nurse's office and administration speaks for itself, as well as the custodial and maintenance needs for the school, right? So when you add up all of the space, it's called net floor area, which are the spaces within the exterior walls of your building. So your program, what currently exists today is 46, that I round, 46,000. And for a school for 325 students, based upon the state's guidelines for educational spaces, right? That's MSBA standards. There's kind of a guideline for the size of a general classroom, guideline for your art and your music, and even some of your special education spaces. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education adamantly says you have to provide the same size classroom for special education students as you do for general education. So even if you only have 10 kids in a classroom, it doesn't matter. It has to be the same size. So those are the standards or guidelines that we refer to. And you'll see that for the Fox Hill only solution for 325 students, you actually need more space than what currently exists today, about 60,000 square feet. And then if you combine for the 640 student school, you'll see that we need about 100,000 square feet for program area. And then once you take that program, you have to gross it up. What that means is we need to provide corridors, toilets, boiler rooms, mechanical spaces, and all of the non-program areas of the school that make up the entire gross square footage of the building. So when you use a grossing factor of 1.5, which is a very efficient building, you'll see that we need approximately 90,000 square feet for a Fox Hill only solution, or if you combine it, it would be approximately 150,000 square feet. So this information is really helpful and really the first step as we start looking at options. Working with the school department over the last month or so, or even longer than that, the numbers have fluctuated. So if you go back even to the previous presentation, you'll see the numbers are not exactly the same. So as we refine the educational program, we also are updating the space summaries and the space requirements.
Can I ask a question? I just was looking for a clarification question. I know that the updated special ed square footage, is that including if we keep the four school model, the DSC would be split and there would be some DSC rooms in the smaller Fox Hill?
So yes,
Is that something that
intent right now is to have DSC 2 move to Fox Hill, and then DSC 1 would stay at Pine Glen, right? So the students in the DSC 2 program require more space. Do you want to?
I'm sorry, I'm in the, be able to make this for, we would divide the program. We haven't discussed, nor would we discuss without including a lot of people on how we would divide the program, whether it's higher functioning, lower functioning, whether there's another way to do it. But the feedback we would get from DESI, MSBA, would be that we couldn't have one school fully dedicated to one population of students. So we know that's coming. So this would be to sort of plan ahead for that. We also know we don't have 3 spare classrooms at Memorial or 3 spare classrooms at Francis Wyman. So again, I'm hoping the case we can make to DESE and then MSBA is that they would support this program expansion, even though the program doesn't currently exist at Fox Hill. So I would say it's a bit of future-proofing the school, again, a little bit. And these, Donna, would be full-size classrooms, even though, again, limited by the regulations regarding this population of student.
Got it.
So,
There would be also in the support spaces required for those students as well, whether it's a motor room or a BCBA, or specialists that support those students. So what we've identified in the educational program and on the space summary is just taking half the program, right, and bringing it over with the support space. And then it's going to be a continued conversation with how that all plays out, but.
Thank you.
So if we continue on, well, one of the last bullets on the slide a few slides ago talked about spatial relationships and adjacencies. And that is a really important consideration and discussion that we want to understand because that will start forming the building. So what are spatial relationships and adjacencies? We want to make sure that we put the programs in the right places to support the students at all times. You certainly don't want a general classroom at one end of the building and then a reading room or a tutor who supports these students all the way at the other end of the building, right? We want to maximize time on learning, have the supports available and readily near the students so that they can receive the services that they need while also being integrated and maintained in the classroom as much as possible. This is a really important consideration. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is going to look really carefully at this. They want to make sure that it's an inclusionary program and that the special education programs are also part of the general education program as appropriate or applicable. Some of the other conversations are, I heard safety, right, at the community forum. Safety is a really important consideration and totally understandably. So how can we use this community asset for community use while also maintaining the safety for the school? So we talk about what are the spaces that the community might be able to use and how can we have those spaces available for the community use while we can close off the academic use or areas of the school. So when the community is using those spaces, they don't just wander the school. We know that's a huge challenge right now at your current school. But ideally, we're able to organize the building so that the community use spaces are available while people don't go wandering the halls of the rest of your school. And then what's also important is to understand what goes on the first floor, because that's going to inform us on how big the footprint of your building is, right? If everyone says we want everything on the first floor, that's certainly a consideration. But typically what we hear is community program spaces want to be on the first floor, right? Your gym, your cafetorium, your stage for after school use, for after school care.
Donna, can I just give an example again?
Yeah.
I do better with concrete examples. Yeah. So we have a program for children who are medically fragile at Francis Wyman. That's a lab program. Obviously, if that's part of our program for Francis Wyman, I'm assuming, Donna, you would design that space on the first floor, which is designed on the first floor, and there's an entrance that's very close to that classroom for safety considerations as well. So that would be, again, floor level aligned with the program and proximity to an exit aligned with the program as well. So again, but it's going to be the program document. I'm going to sound like a broken record. I apologize. It's the program document that's going to drive the design decisions then that we need to do. So I'm sorry.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And add to that, proximity to the nurse, right? And so all of those conversations we'll continue to have as we move forward in the process. And then the next slide really just says, okay, we've had some conversations about what a combined school would look like. We have to look at this. I just cannot, if we do not look at this, MSBA will say, go back and look at it and study it. We have to look at it. I think it actually will be very helpful in the process when we start looking at and evaluating all of the options, because you'll at least have an understanding of the impact this 640 student school may have on the site, on the district, the impacts. A lot of people are already there with a lot of their comments, and I think those are very helpful, but we do have to go through the process. So we did start looking at, okay, what would this two-school solution look like? So I don't really want to dwell on it, but it is important because we have to articulate to MSBA what the proposed plan would be if you did look at this. We have to do this. It's not an option. So when you see two educational programs, please don't automatically go see they're thinking about that. We have to submit them. And that's why we actually chose to have two separate educational programs, so we don't have to then combine them later, right? You can pick one down the road. So looking at a combined school, again, just trying to maintain two individual identities with the core shared use in the middle, is sort of the spatial relationship and adjacency diagram that allows us to start building or forming the building blocks of the actual footprint and of the building. Very similar to what we just talked about for Fox Hill. And then we would just do the same and have the same conversations with Pine Glen about their programs, their specialized programs and what their needs are. So, yes.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I'm not sure, Donna, this is for you, or it's for you, Dr. Conti. I see on the Pine Glen side, the developmental, thank you. On the Pine Glen side, I see the developmental skills program. Dr. Conti, you were talking about future-proofing the district. I see on the Fox Hill side, the lab collaborative. Can you just describe what's the difference between the two in terms of how we move them into the different schools?
I do thank you for pointing that out. We have not updated this slide to also add the developmental skills onto the Fox Hill side as well, but.
Again, my understanding, and please, I'm the last person you want designing the building, is that, George, this is just make sure that we account for all the spaces needed by the program. So, and some adjacencies, I think the feedback that we often get is, the placement of the classrooms, whether lab or developmental skills type classroom, it can't be an afterthought. So we can't put together, for instance, let's say we were building the 3 homeroom school. We can't put together these brilliant 3 homeroom clusters and then at the end say, oh, we need 3 more classrooms for DSC, let's put them down this hallway. The Department of Ed I wouldn't allow that, but I'm saying the Department of Ed wouldn't allow it either. So I think when we're looking at adjacencies, we also have to look at inclusionary practices and the regulations to do that. So again, my understanding is this as a representative is just reflective of the space requirements. And then beginning to look at adjacencies, if we were to look at the school different ways as a straight up 640 student school, completely mixed, that might look a little bit different than sort of 2 distinctive school personalities combined in the same site. And again, just want to repeat, no decision has been made. And the better job we do looking at this, which is the state preferred option when they started this, the better chance we're going to have to respond to a smaller option moving forward. But again, we do need to make sure that we look at, we're looking at both, and we're looking at both, I think, in a high quality way. The one option I think we can skimp on a little bit is rehabilitating the Snowflake current design, because it's just wouldn't make sense programmatically, and it wouldn't honestly reflect our current program. So again, I would make a programmatic argument as to why that building doesn't serve us well. the physical condition, there are experts here to answer that, but I would say that building doesn't serve the program needs that we currently have. Nor does the Pine Glen, to be honest with you, but that's a whole separate conversation. But what we're looking at is to make sure, again, the Department of Ed supports our program, George, and then to make sure the MSBA will support the program in terms of funding. And again, we would distribute the DSC classrooms throughout the building, maybe in an age-appropriate way. And we would look to do something similar with the lab if there were, safety concerns or floor concerns or mobility concerns. I'm assuming, Donna, you would reflect all of that in your design thinking.
And we started those conversations with labs, so.
Thanks, sir. Dr.
Does that-
Conti, the follow-up question, then going back to the 2 slides to pick the Foxville option. And I think you might have already answered this. DSC is not reflected in this adjacency.
No, these 2 slides haven't been updated yet, so we will update them and reflect that, yes. That was conversations that we've become best friends. Lots of conversation.
Ms. Gilbert.
Hi, just really quick, just to clarify, if DESE is going to require, splitting up the programs to not have autism housed all in one school, if you're going to go to a 640 school, how will you do that then, that way?
We might have to look at, obviously we would need to include a district program in that school, but we probably look to, reallocate some space elsewhere. I think there are 3 lab classrooms now at Memorial, if my thinking is correct, and we might need to sort of move that program. One of the things that we also had to reflect on, which is why the program document is so important, is lab currently has 2 classrooms. Actually, their program has 3 classrooms, but Foxville only has space for 2 classrooms. So what they've done is they've split their program. So their program is 3 classrooms. 1 is at Memorial and 2 are at Fox Hill. So ideally, with whatever decision we make, programmatically, we're looking to unify that program under a new building. But again, if we did that, then we would probably have to divide our program across all of our elementary schools. The state doesn't want to have, again, one school building, have all of your district programming, and we would look to, we have very specialized district programming, again, as you live every day, and we would look to divide those up across all of our elementary schools.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone raising their hand online? Okay. So this really just brings us to where we currently are, right? Again, just to reiterate, we actually have an option 9, but MSBA, for their agreement, is saying you need to look at least 8 options. And we'll do that, right? Some of them will be pretty obvious. We know that a code upgrade and a repair with no benefit educationally to the Fox Hill School won't support your educational needs. We've already just proven that. You have less space now than what is showing what you need. So that is, one that perhaps at PDP, you can actually remove from conversation. Addition renovation has to be looked at seriously as well, and then as well as a new school. Going back to what Dr. Conti was saying, we really do need to look at the 640 student options seriously and give it equal weight when we're looking at them. We're not saying equal weight for voting on it, but we need to look at it in the same way that we're looking at a smaller school. And to go a step further, we actually have to look at options at Pine Glen site because it now becomes part of the conversation. So now you have 2 sites that we have to consider. And maybe there's more, right? We are going to look at the Overlook Park. Someone had mentioned that, so we are looking into that. Maybe there are others, but MSBA is saying, okay, well now we want you to also look at the Pine Glen site. Maybe that's the preferred location. So we have to do that. So we just want everyone to know that
what the outcome and as part of the PDP will show is, it will guide you, it will provide you the information to make an informed decision. It will give you really rough order magnitude costs for every single one of these options. And that's just really important. So you can say, oh, to repair the school only with no educational benefit is going to cost, I'm going to make up numbers, $10. But a brand new school is going to cost me $50. Well, and I get a brand new school, total, all the educational benefits, et cetera. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? It's just helpful to understand what your investment is going to have to be over the life of the school if you choose to do nothing else, right? A renovation, because that's why you're in this program, both the building needs work as well as the spaces are not appropriate for today's educational program. So sometimes MSBA asks you to look at things in a way that you might not understand, but they're not saying they support the snowflake design, but they want you to look at it to understand what your cost would be if you do nothing, right?
And Donna, Steve, I'm going to drag you into this conversation a little bit. So, just so, we can share the blame here, but I just can't stress enough, the MSBA has a process that has to fit the entire state, from rural Western Mass to an urban setting. So that's why the process is very structured. If you want tens of millions of their dollars, they're going to tell you how to go through this, right? So everyone has to accept that. The initial sort of buy-in was when we had to accept their enrollment projections. That's not an option. You want their money, you have to accept their enrollment projections. And their enrollment projections are generally, whatever methodology they use, have been generally pretty good. I think their enrollment projections are relatively short-sighted to the length of the building, which is why you want to try to put some future proofing in, because again, these buildings are 25, 40, 50 years. They have to serve us all through that time. The example that I use is I grew up in Arlington, and when I was there, there were two junior high schools. There was East and West. There was a big rivalry. After I left, after about 4 years in middle school, the enrollment declined across the town, and they ended up shutting down the East Junior High, and they created the West Middle School, the Ottoson. And the Ottoson served the community well. Now enrollment's back up, but the town of Arlington had kept the East Middle School. I think it was functioning as a charter or something, but they kept it functioning. They kept control of the property, kept control of the building. Their enrollment climbed again. They really have no buildable space in Arlington, similar to Burlington. And so what they ended up doing is taking back over the East and making it into a sixth grade school, similar to Needham, I think has a sixth grade school. So that then offloaded the Ottoson, the West. And so now they have basically a middle school that's split over two locations, but the town sort of allowed that to happen by keeping a site and a property sort of functioning as a school moving forward as a way of future-proofing that. So I think that's why sort of we have to look at all of these options carefully. And I think, again, the time frame we have to use, I think, is longer than the next couple of years. I think we have to look out 50 years as best we can. Steve, my conversation with you is, or my looking for a comment is, you've been involved in lots of different projects. It's rare, my understanding, for the MSBA to back off of their 23-to-1 ratio. Is that a factual statement?
That's a very fair statement. Yep. And, just working with the MSBA process, I think one thing that they say routinely, it's on their website, kind of their mantra, is that they're trying to find the most educationally and financially responsible solution. But they do stress finding the educationally responsible thing to do first. So that's where the process starts, and that all comes down to the program and the building and a lot of the conversation tonight. But to directly answer your question, it's exceedingly rare to back away from that ratio.
I think I'm only aware of one other community where that was accepted. So again, I just want to give, that's a reason to be optimistic that the state is wanting to build a school. They're willing to defer to the class ratio that Burlington has traditionally supported. And again, that's a programmatic conversation, not a location or site conversation. So we've already had sort of a huge, I would consider a huge win in this conversation, and the ability to even look at 4 schools, which we would not have had if we were running the 23 student option. Even if our enrollment were to go back to the days when this high school opened at 2,000 kids, even if we were to double the population in 40 years, their projections only go out 10. So it's an interesting dilemma. But I think, again, we should celebrate, thank them, express some gratitude, and thank them that they are willing to look at our schools in terms of how they're operating now, which I think is a very good thing.
So looking at it programmatically is just really critical. The other thing, just no one can predict, 20 years, 30 years. There's no data to be able to really truly support that looking forward. However, MSBA does recognize that this is a 50 or 75-year solution, right?
Yeah, well, Donna, while no one can predict, I would say even without a design degree, I wouldn't support a snowflake design as being sort of lasting decades. So I was saying,
we did not do that at school, but so looking at schools, MSBA will say to us, where would you put an addition? They want to make sure that when you do design the building, that you think about future expansion, right? And that's really important. So, where would that look? Where would that fit? Are you going to put, we actually do really spend a lot of time thinking about that. Like, can we relocate a stair, or where do we put the stair at the end of a corridor to make sure that when you have to put an expansion on, or need it, if you do need to, that you can easily do it. And so you're not disrupting the entire school, right? That's really important. There probably are going to be certain kind of items that we won't be able to think that far ahead. So a lot of times people say, well, design the school so that's 2 stories now, but in the future we can do 3 stories. Inevitably, we can't control what the seismic code requirements are going to be in the future, but I can tell you now that even trying to anticipate that, and some of the buildings that we've designed in the past, they don't even support that now. So the way the best think about future expansion is really more horizontally instead of vertically. But we can even start talking about that, right? How much more would it cost for you to design a school that we could actually add a 3rd floor to, right? So MSBA recognizes their enrollment was out 10 years and that your building will last you far longer than that. So that is also, and designing a school that's flexible, that's thoughtful, that engages the educators. I don't know if that was an educational decision with Snowflake or an architectural Reader's Digest, but it's really important to engage all of the educators to understand best practices, understand what's really important and how we can design in a way that would be flexible for the future.
Donna, again, I just have to stress this. You and I have talked about this a lot. People hear flexible and they think of flexible walls. So the reason Fox Hill looks like it does, and the reason this high school looks like it does, is when they were built, open classrooms were sort of the thing. So what you're saying is these will be sort of rectangular classrooms that may be repurposed in the future if technology changes and everything else, but the walls aren't, the space will be flexible, but the walls aren't flexible. Is that, so I just want to make sure that people don't get nervous about.
Be mindful, right? Making sure that we have sinks in classrooms. That's actually an MSBA requirement, but having 2 sinks in classrooms is a really important consideration so that everyone's going to project-based learning. And so they have access in your classrooms for these types of programmatic requirements in your classrooms. Making sure you have 2 sinks in every classroom, one per project, and the other one so it's accessible, right? We again, inclusion, make sure that every student has full access to all of these. So yes, I promise, unless for a specific reason you will not have multiple partitions in your school. I think that's made very clear.
I know you had mentioned something about thinking ahead as far as renovations and things like that, making sure sounds like the only option would be to go horizontally. Does that mean the buildings that we're considering building, whether it be the 325 or the 640, are these going to just be as high as we can make them, like with the 3 floors, or are we considering the 2-floor design for either of those and then adding on to those as needed? I just know that you were teetering between the 2 floors and 3 floors.
Yeah, we're not teetering. I don't mean it like disrespectfully. We're gonna look at both options. A lot of schools, given the site limitations, especially because you have an existing building on your site, right? So you have an existing building on your site, we have some wetlands, we have a vernal pool, and more, we get really excited about the opportunity to embrace your site for outdoor learning and really make this also a community asset. So the fewer floors just requires a larger footprint, which just makes the building sprawl a little bit more. There's carbon footprint that people talk about. So there's all kinds of sustainable decisions that may think that a 3-story solution is better. Time on learning, just getting from classroom to classroom vertically is quicker than having a longer corridor. But all of these decisions and discussions will occur as soon as we get through our MSBA PDP. All of these, we've started laying them out, just to get a feel, just so people can start thinking about it. But all of those conversations will occur as soon as we get through PDP. So we don't have any preconceived ideas if it should be a 2-story or a 3-story. I think ultimately that will be the building committee's decision and the community's decision, what fits best, what feels best. And there's a whole bunch of priorities that will be really important as we start looking at those, right? Time on learning, adjacencies, what's important. We maximize the site. What about the parking? You have an incredible program. It requires a lot of staff. What's that impact to pavement and parking? So all of these conversations will occur once we submit the PDP.
Don, let's be specific about lots of staff, because we have some staff members here from Fox Hill. So if we have 30 kids in the developmental skills program, we would have potentially 5 teachers, but close to 30 or 25 to 30 instructional assistants. So you're talking just for those classrooms, potentially 30 to 35 people. Would love to think that everyone carpools, but that's probably not the case. So there's going to be, am I echoing? I'm sorry. My head is hollow. The parking needs are going to be significant, and obviously we have to have certain parking for within code of handicap. But if we were building a special program, for instance, I'm assuming that we would look at parking a little bit differently. Again, Amanda, I don't want to get too far ahead because I'm asking you not to get too far ahead with programming, but I also think when we're looking at the building systems. So again, a concrete example in Burlington was the middle school design was done, I think 5 or 6 years before we actually had to do it again. I think there was a vote that didn't occur here, but the HVAC system failed in the old building. And so the town had to do an emergency, Roger, you might remember this better than I do. I just heard stories, but you had to put in a very expensive HVAC system. And I think what the town did smartly is they sized it for the future design of the building, and they put all of the pipes, the things where they needed to connect to, they had put those in when they did the initial installation. So again, they tried to future-proof it. And I think 5 or 6 years later, the addition and design was accepted into the MSBA program. The internal system was already designed to fit the building envelope, which increased significantly by the whole new wing. And actually what was surprising to me then, again, Steve, you can confirm this or not, is the MSBA actually reimbursed us for the HVAC system that was already 4 or 5 years old. Is that right, Bob? I want to make sure my timing is somewhat, but yes. Yeah, so I'm saying I think that was a great way to think about this too. So it's not only this is where an additional wing could go, but also when, again, they design the pipes and all that other stuff, there may be easier ways to tap into that where we're not incurring a whole bunch of other costs for that. So we, again, and I think that's the role of the project manager and the designer to work together to make sure that, we're not, we're saving money for future possibilities.
Does anyone have any other questions related to the educational program?
Don, if we have a few minutes, Christine, I think I shared the document with you because it's kind of like a term paper. Can you share your screen and put it up? I sent it to you as a Google Doc link.
Today?
Yes, just about 15 minutes ago. I was paying attention, but I did it.
And while he's doing that, through the chair, if I may, putting together the educational program description for this process has been a huge project. And I know Dr. Conti, and I don't know who all the other people are, but I know that lots and lots of people have been involved in that, and teachers and the Dora Whittier folks and Donna. And I just want to acknowledge that that was a huge thing that we needed to do in order to move forward to understand what our educational needs are. And so now we're counting on Danisco to build, put out options of how can we meet that educational need? What would the building look like? And what, and then we'll be able to look at what's this going to cost and all that. So I want to thank all those people who put this document we're about to see together. You on that too?
You got it? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for being so flexible. I appreciate it. We're not going to read it, please. It's like everyone will fall asleep, but I do want to just show you some sort of the layout and what we're looking at. And then the critical piece is that these words have to match the spreadsheet, Donna, that you were showing in regards to space. And I just think visually what we're talking about is sort of the MSBA approved appropriate space these days is about twice the space that everyone is used to. So I think sometimes we're sort of used to our own context. But even at a 325 student option that we're looking at, we're talking what, 85, 90,000 sort of potentially square feet of space. So if you can just scroll slowly, I'll stop you when we get to it. So we're trying to identify different programs. So you want to just hop right there. We have to do an introduction. Again, we assume the MSBA doesn't know the community values. So we start with our sort of vision, mission. Christina, keep going. And then what our theory of action is. These are all taken from the Planning for Success document, the 3-year district improvement plan that we worked on all of last year. So it's somewhat relevant. I can't read that, so let me try to keep up. Grades and school configuration policies, so we're trying to convey to them what it is. If you could go to class size, the chart, I just want to sort of make sure I'm emphasizing to everybody. Again, kindergarten through 5th grade, you see 1 to 18, is what we're sort of saying, and these are our current class sizes as enrolled. So really trying to be reflective. This is Fox Hill and all elementary. Obviously, I just want to make sure everyone understands we're submitting 2 program documents because we have to submit 2 program documents. Submitting one for a Fox Hill school and one for a combined school. And our elementary programs are largely the same. In terms of, you talk about, we don't have a Pine Glen art program and a Fox Hill art program. We have an art program. Some of our specialized programs may be, again, a little bit different. So we're sort of focusing on making sure that we have the Fox Hill program accurately. And then when we combine it, we'll make sure that's reflective of the same thing. But we're trying to, again, demonstrate to the MSBA that we are sincere with our 1801. We didn't make that up just for this building project. This is a historical policy in Burlington. And again, making sure that they know that we are supporting their decision and giving them the evidence to do that, because they're going to turn other communities down. And I think that's what you all have to understand. There are going to be other communities that say, boy, we have 25 kids in our class, but we want 18. They're going to say, sorry, we draw the line at 23. And they're going to say, but you just supported 18 for Burlington. And they might say, yeah, but Burlington historically has supported 18. So they didn't make that up to try to get more classrooms. So that was it. Student enrollment, again, is the next chart that we looked at. Again, looking at just some different class sizes. We're using their model at 18, obviously, how to make sure the school added up to 325. Some of this should be that you don't have to look at my comments. I think you covered up, which are good. So school scheduling method, Christina, again, the principals all check this out, but we want to make sure, again, what program we're offering, how many minutes per week. They want to see a weekly snapshot of how many minutes. And they want to make sure the space that they're supporting is actually used. So that's what we need to demonstrate to them is we don't just have a library it's not a museum. We actually have kids in the library, and this is what they're going to do and how many minutes they're using it. So I think we have to make that case. We have to talk about prep time for teachers, because part of this is professional space for teachers. If we're looking at collaborative space, things like that, we need to do that. Are the kids taking instruments? Because oftentimes instruments are an afterthought, and if we put a quiet space next to a music room, again, maybe a poor adjacency picture, but also I think a lot of elementary schools end up having instrumental lessons on a stage, for instance, because that's where the space existed, or it wasn't reflected in their original program document. So will we have, Carnegie Hall level practice rooms? Maybe not, but we probably will have some spaces where the lessons can take place and not be disruptive to other learning that's happening. Again, physical education. And I think we're really talking about, Donna, from our conversations, making sure there's both indoor and outdoor space for student activity. And I think that was a priority for the teachers. I'm sorry, my mic is off, but I thought that was a priority for the teachers as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, could you keep scrolling? We talk a little bit about what multi-tiered instruction is and how the adjacencies the adjacencies are important, because we may have students not just staying in one classroom all day. There may be some movement where they have to move to different classes. And one of the challenges with current Fox Hill is not every wing of the snowflake can hold an entire grade level. So David's not here. I'm not sure if David's on the call, but David, what grade is split?
We have fourth grade split and fifth grade split.
So it just makes the walking time harder. And then again, just like us, or just like me, I should say, don't like sitting in one spot sort of all day. And not that the kids are sitting, you guys have them up, but I'm just saying have them move around is sort of important. We're trying to explain that to MSBA. Some of this might be so obvious to you and you're going to say, oh, of course, but remember, MSBA doesn't know our program. We're trying to make that argument to MSBA. World language, we're currently not offering elementary world language. There are some districts that do. If that required extra space, then we would need to design that. Would I love to obviously offer elementary world language? I would, but it's not currently part of our program. If I included it in the program document and we weren't using it, red flag for MSBA. But we do have a significant ELL population, English language learners, that is growing. So we're looking to make sure that we have classrooms that support that. Literacy and math support, again, we offer lots of tutoring. We want to make sure that there's space that is, again, appropriate. So there may be some smaller spaces, again, where some tutoring can happen during the day that is quiet and not necessarily in the same classroom or not in the hallway. And what we've had to do with Fox Hill and Pine Glen, honestly, is we've taken hallway space and we put up partitions and created sort of offices or smaller learning spaces. And I think Pine Glen, the egg is now what, famous, for, all the uses that it's had, and I think it's gonna finally go away this summer. We talk about extended day programming because, we have students in our after-school program that is very popular across town, and currently we are busing students, to programs across town. So we're sending Fox Hill students in the Y program to Francis Wyman, and, I think Pine Glen and Memorial has its own program, but, one of the challenges we face, not that it's anything, is Francis Wyman ends at a later time, so we have, some after-school elementary kids from Fox Hill and Pine Glen arriving at Francis Wyman sort of 40 minutes before the school day ends, and it's another management problem for Francis Wyman. So, making sure that, again, technically is it part of our educational program? No, but it's a community use and a community need that currently exists that, Donna needs to account for it in her spacing, and that we're hoping MSBA will understand. Maybe if we want to make an argument to have the gym be 1,000 extra square feet, maybe a basketball argument isn't compelling for them, but maybe an after-school program for an existing program that's bursting, that we can't meet all the need we have, maybe that's the better argument that we make. Maybe for a slightly larger cafeteria or something like that. So again, I'm beating this horse dead, but that's the program link to the space that we need to do. We don't offer currently pre-kindergarten, programming at Fox Hill. It's, again, many districts have their preschool classrooms sort of located in an elementary school. We have them centrally located. And as I stated, I don't think if we said we need 6 pre-K classrooms at this new building, I don't think that would be supported. Again, lunch program, I'm still sort of going through. Oh, I think I'm well ahead of you. You gotta catch up.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I didn't want to go too fast.
That's all right. Going,
What page are you on?
I'm gonna go, where am I? I'm on page, 21. It's the graphic, yeah. So I want to show that, if you hadn't heard about me talk about it, then you probably haven't been listening, but Computer Science for All is a huge effort in the district for our program. So we're sort of building, high school, middle, and an elementary program. So when Donna's talking about the extra, STEM classroom, the extra STEM space, we have to say that we have a fully formed program that is ready to utilize that space, and sort of how we're delivering that. A lot of the schools, again, the adjacencies that we talked about, because libraries are becoming more flexible for maker spaces, right? The bookcases are on wheels. They'd like to be able to push them to the side. They'd like to have big open spaces. On some of the schools, Donna, that we've looked at, the STEM classroom is adjacent to the library sometimes. Is that so they can connect some of the project-based work, or am I not thinking of?
No, you are. So a lot of times project-based learning can occur in the library, the media center, right? They don't like the library.
Sorry.
Media center. So that and the art. So you're kind of creating a nice theme, right? STEM with the A for art, and it's theme areas, which
Believe it or not, not every elementary school has a one-to-one philosophy where students have, access to a web-enabled device. We do. That may change how the classrooms are laid out. It may change the built-ins. It may change the number of outlets. It may change a lot of other things, but that's part of our educational program that we would want to make sure that we're designing for. Again, the visual arts program is our, really important part of it. And that was my kiln example that we used before. So again, who looked at this? Again, George Rakovich reviewed this part of the visual arts program, just to make sure that it was reflective of what we were trying to do. If we offered art 5 times a week, we would require more classroom space than offering it 1 time a week for 45 minutes. So that's the connection between program and space. And again, the importance of art. I'm going down to, student art. I'm on page, what am I on, 26 now. Physical education, program, again, Matt Jackling, our director of health and PE, looked at, this language to make sure that we were supportive of that. And again, I think the biggest thing, in listening to, all the educators was the connection between indoor learning and outdoor learning. So what does that mean? Maybe is that wouldn't make sense to put the gym on the third floor. Again, I know we're talking about two-story. If outdoor learning is something that's really important and you want kids to be able to come and go easily, then obviously where we place the gym is important. So again, don't mean to be so obvious, but I think that's part of it. Where am I now? 27. Again, a little bit more about some of the stuff, how we teach related services. When you want to park at related services for a minute, that is on 28. So these are some positions that may not have existed when Fox Hill was originally built. I'm going to say they didn't exist when Fox Hill was originally built, and they're sort of relatively new with the emphasis on social emotional learning, student mental health. We need to make sure that we have spaces for, again, these type of assistive services because we want to be more inclusive, and it's respectful of the children who are receiving these services to make sure that they have an appropriate space. And now's the time to do that. So again, you can read all the categories if you slow down, sort of scrolling on slowly. There we have orientation and mobility. We want to make sure that we have a continuation of services. If you could go down to the chart, I'm just trying to do this visually. So we're also trying to lay out where all of our special ed programming exists across the district. Where do we have district programs? To mention, to sort of reinforce some of the questions that were asked. So we don't have one school that's identified as a school that is solely for one type of student population or program. We're looking sure that we can sort of distribute that. And again, the case that we want to make to MSBA is even if we weren't building a new Fox Hill, we would more than likely have to divide the Pine Glen program and distribute that across our elementary schools. So it doesn't exist now, but we want you to accept it into the program study. That's going to be the next conversation that we have. And again, I think the rest of it is largely about special education. There's a section on the DSC because we need to do that. Again, Christina Ciccolini, our Director of Special Ed, has been directly involved in doing this moving forward. I don't need to go through any more of this, but I wanted to show you sort of what the program document consists of. We're trying to make sure that it accurately reflects what we do. I can't stress the importance of this document sort of enough in terms of where we are in the process currently. Everyone has a different aspect of the project that they are sort of most attuned to. But if the program isn't right, then no one's going to be satisfied after the fact. So someone may say, I want to have a zero emission or whatever the term is building. That's awesome. But I'm saying that net zero building has to serve our program or else it's going to not be utilized well from my perspective. So I will clearly say my bias is on program, which is where we're at now, which is why I'm talking so much. But I think we have lots of reasons to be optimistic, and whether we're doing, again, at one location or two locations, we have to do the analysis of everything. And no matter what we propose the program has to match what we do and be approved of. And I think one of the things that everyone can get behind in Burlington is the quality of elementary program that we have. And so that's really the start where we are. So Steve, the timing of this is, again, the MSBA board has to schedule their meeting in the next month.
So we'll be working, again, we're in feasibility, so preliminary design program will take us through mid-July. When we make a submission, there's no board hearing at the MSBA for the preliminary design program. They do an internal review, give us feedback primarily on the educational program and space summary, where the options are headed. The first board meeting won't be until after we finish Bird schematic, which will be in December. So the next month to 6 weeks is putting every option on the table, doing a preliminary evaluation of those alternatives, not really obligated to come to any conclusions whatsoever, except for maybe the low hanging fruit, as Donna mentioned, the renovation only options, because it would be just such a severe, impact to educational delivery and making some pretty big consolidation, just some pretty big compromises there. And then the next 6 months from July to December is narrowing down the 8 to 1. So we have a little bit of time.
For the program. And they might read it and say, we don't like this section, you need to redo it, you need to add more specificity or something like that. Do we get a chance, if we want to go in and argue in person? I'm better at that, Don.
You're persuasive, either way, you're persuasive.
So we don't get to make the argument in person.
They do give us a list of very detailed comments by section of the submittal. So we have an opportunity to review those. It's not just the project team, it's the educators and the building committee to respond to those comments. And then the educational program gets refined in response to those comments and resubmitted again in December as part of PSR.
And at some point, though, they will give us something in writing that says, we accept your program as submitted. And we're submitting 2. So we need approval of both.
So what they'll be, so at PDP, we're just going to submit both. Again, like we said, very slight nuances, right? Your program's your program. The differences between the 2 documents are how you might deliver that program differently in a combined school.
Okay.
That's solely the nuances between the 2 educational programs, right? Because everyone has art so many days a week, everyone has music, but that doesn't change. It's really just how you might deliver that program differently if you look at a 2-school option. They will give us comments back, as Steve said. We will reply in kind, but they will not then come back. It's not a dialogue or a conversation. We then would have to continue on unless there's some very large red flags that we say we need to have a conversation. But a lot of times they're like, please explain why you need a kiln, or please tell us why, or how would you train your staff to use a kiln, or can you explain a little bit more what the differences between your tutors and your literacy specialists? Like, those are the types of nuanced questions that would be asking us. And if there is something large, then we would probably say, can we have a conversation? But they typically do not engage in dialogue. It's give us everything, we'll review it. So we will submit our responses to the PDP, which are 2 weeks, right? 14 calendar days, two business weeks to respond to them. And then we just keep going. So we assume that they accepted our responses and that we'll just keep going. And if there's any questions, we might say, just confirming you're good with this, because they know all of our decisions that we're going to be making throughout the rest of the preferred schematic report are based on this overall gross square footage program and gross square footage. So we should know more or less what they've accepted and what they haven't accepted at that point.
And again, I'm sorry, go ahead, Martha. I just want to get some deadlines.
I was glad to hear you say that there may be some low-hanging fruit we don't have to submit to. That of the 8 options, for me, there's some obvious low-hanging fruit, and we don't have to do it tonight, and, but is there a process that we can use as a committee to make sure everybody, I haven't heard anyone say we really should just renovate, and I believe we shouldn't just renovate, that's my personal opinion, but will we have a chance so that if there's people who feel we should consider that option going forward, but if nobody is really considering that renovation option, either at the Fox Hill site or at the Pine Glen site, then we maybe could go ahead with 6, or renovation in addition even. So I'm hoping that in one of our future meetings, we'll have a chance to do that before we have to submit 6, 8, 6 options, the fewer we could submit that we feel comfortable to make sure that we've heard. So is that something that will come up in a later meeting?
Yeah, I think similar to starting with the educational program in terms of right-sizing the building and determining options. so is also just, we have to do the work from MSBA standpoint anyway. So we have to show our work, we have to show, we're basically study every option at this phase with the same level of detail. So while it's okay for your mind to kind of venture there, we do try to, hit pause and just, the time will be there to review that. What we haven't gotten to yet is the, evaluation criteria, which is kind of like the formal time to start piecing out where each of these options fit in that matrix. And some of those options are really easy to do without that, but not all of them.
Right, but the program should drive that. I think that's the point, Martha, is, if we're going on this work to describe our program, what we're saying is the current building doesn't serve our program.
Right.
There could be some made-up community that might say, instead of doing the programmatic conversation first, again, I'm not sure this would ever happen, but they could say, we have, $35 million is all we have to spend. Give us the best school you can for that, for $35 million.
So it doesn't work like that.
No, right, it doesn't work that way, but I'm saying I don't want to necessarily jump the gun on, I think if the program doesn't fit in the building, I think it's going to be obvious why we can't support using the existing
And
building.
will be reflected in the criteria matrix when we fill it out.
Yeah.
So as you go through the options
Yeah.
and the criteria matches your program,
Right.
it will lend to
Okay.
the, low hanging fruit, if you will, as far as evaluating them. Thank you. Yeah.
So we will have preliminary costs for each one of the options, right? So that's one, so many criteria that you want to weigh against. And again, it's a benchmark for MSBA too, right? Say, okay, if you do nothing, it's going to cost you this. In many situations, an addition renovation ends up costing more than new construction because of the way the existing building's been designed. So it's not a cost benefit, right, to do an addition renovation in many instances, although in some it works. But so we'll have very preliminary numbers and costs. Hopefully we're going to roll that out. We'll get into the schedule, but that should be the next time that you can start thinking about. And these low hanging fruit might be check all the boxes to eliminate, right? Thank you.
Again, Donna, just some deadlines for me, and I think we've talked about it, but I want to make sure the committee is aware. My understanding is the June 13th school committee meeting is when we'd like to. Oh, then I'll shut up.
You want me to go to the meeting? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so this is just an outline of our upcoming school committee meetings and school building committee meetings, and then seeing another community. So we plan on meeting with school committee on June 13th to further review of the educational program and space summary information, and then to have our June 20th school building committee meeting at 6 p.m. And then we'll also review the educational program aspects, space summary, and the building concepts. We'll then be going to the June 26th school committee meeting, and that will be where we'll ask for approval of the educational program and space summary information. Following that, we then like to have another building committee meeting the week of June 26th to review that cost estimate information that Donna had talked about earlier. Once we finalize the educational program, the spatial, gross square footage, that way we can present to you rough order of magnitude costs when it comes to the concepts and the options that we're studying right now. So that'll be the first opportunity to review that information the week of June 26th. We plan on having our second community meeting on July 11th, and that'll be at 7 p.m. We'll review basically all updates on information since we last met with the community as far as further development of the concepts, the criteria, the options, educational program, etc. And then we will be meeting with the school building committee meeting on July 13th, and that will be when we ask to approve the PDP and submit it to the MSBA.
Madam Chair, again, I'm going to even get a little bit more granular and ask you what your preference is. It would seem to me if we're not looking for a vote until June 26th, that if the committee can get the, program document, again, you don't need a huge lead time between June 13th, because maybe we can do a first read, second read, and if that's okay, and then we
I
can.
think that was the goal.
That's the goal, so we'll get it out publicly on the 13th, once it's shared with the committee. And then, you would be then looking to vote on the 26th. So again, we need to finish finish writing in the next couple weeks. Yeah. Okay, and is that both plans, Don? I just want to make sure, so you'll do a first reading of both plans on June 13th
With the space summaries,
with the space
with
summary.
the MS space summaries that reflect the space needs to match the educational program.
It's not a busy time of year. is it?
If I could also just reinforce that the school committee meeting of the 26th has been a move, we've moved it. It's not on a Tuesday. June 26th is a Monday. There is no regular school committee meeting on the 27th when it would normally be, but we have moved it for various reasons. So I'm trying to make it very explicit. We've talked about it, but for if people are listening or think they might want to attend that meeting or listen in, it is a Monday night, which is very unusual for the school committee, so I'm making a big deal. So it registers in people's minds that it will be a different night of the week than we normally meet.
Thank you. And the week of the 26th night is still to be determined. That's the school building committee.
Okay.
Yeah, we just wanted to follow the school committee meeting. Yes. So we just have to confirm some schedules before we complete that.
Okay.
I'll go back up.
I'm done talking, so thank you. And I didn't mean to get ahead of your slides, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
No, I think actually, given the time, we were gonna just wrap this up and, just open it, I think.
Or do you want to talk about the
Criteria?
Yeah, we have that criteria.
Yeah.
So we had sent out information, obviously, to the school building committee to review the initial criteria. As you can see, this is kind of our matrix on the screen that was sent out as a survey to the building committee to get their insight as far as the different core groups as well as the criteria below each group. Just to confirm that they agree that we include this information as criteria as we're reviewing the different options itself. So everyone, majority of the school building committee did reply with their insight and their information. And this is a reflection of their feedback as far as criteria that we will be including. There was a couple of just small refinements to some of the wording on some of them just based off of comments below each section itself. But majority of the building committee agreed that these are the criteria that we should be including on the matrix as we further study the different options itself. So our goal is then to send this out to the building committee individually, so that way they can provide their input for each of the different criteria based off of their evaluation of the different options.
And the only other thing, that I just would like to state is the location of the building on the site is still totally open. You know, we're starting thinking about different locations of where a building could go. We're still looking at, is it a 2-story or a 3-story? So that conversation, will play out and have a lot of opportunity for conversation there. So when you look at these options, it's really, really high level. It's not saying pick a solution or pick an option or aspects of an option. It's just, are we gonna repair the building? Are we gonna put an addition on, or do we want a new school? And if it's the new school option, that's what the next 6 months are for, is for us to refine the solution, and what makes the most sense, right? So I just don't want, people to think, there's not opportunity for input. There's plenty of time for input and conversation, and all of that will happen once we communicate. And once
cost information with that as well.
Can I just ask that in getting to that part that we're starting to seek input from the community, that we're including some in-person opportunities? I know like the WebEx with pushing the information out on the 18th meeting was great, but even I am pretty tech savvy and I ran into an issue with my volume and not being able to be heard. And as we're trying to get that feedback, I just want to make sure that it's not hindering anyone from being heard. So I know there was discussion about possible hybrid options that you've done in other communities. So moving forward, getting closer to that July date, if we could maybe start talking about that, that would be great.
So the plan for July is still to be virtual, just due to the nature, I think, of vacations. And that way folks can watch it remotely. But we're like charging one for September to be in the auditorium at Patty School.
Great.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Awesome.
We can also make that one hybrid, so that way there's opportunity for people to come in person, but then also people to view it broadcast as well.
Thank you.
I think the next couple of slides we covered already, so I can just go ahead to public comment. If that makes sense.
All right, I'm happy to open it for public comment. We can start in the room. If you want to come up, yeah, please state your name and you have 3 minutes. You can come up right here, make sure the microphone's on. Can you maybe like wait for a 30-second warning?
Thank you. My name is Michael McCarthy. I'm here with my wife Brenda. We live on Westwood Street. We've been living in our house that we bought there for over 40 years, since 1982. Our sons both went to Fox Hill School, both came here to Burlington High School and graduated, and have since gone on to having their own families in other communities. I'm here, I understand the focus on the programs that you have to define and seek different options and present different things. But I haven't heard anything at all, and maybe it will come up at some point, of the impact on the surrounding community. And the, just the idea that you're talking about a 3-story building in a residential community that we have, it tells me you haven't considered the impact on the community. When we first moved in, Westwood Street was a much different street than what it is now. It was pretty much just a regular side street that school buses came up and down, but that all changed in the 90s when they decided to put in the sidewalk, which I understand for like the kids who do walk to school, the handful of them to go up to the school. But they also at the same time decided to widen the road and put a double yellow line down the middle of it. And the town engineer at the time, Mr. Chowdhury, told me they did that so that they would get state money. Well, you know, the impact on the residents of Westwood Street was totally negative for that. We now have a local version of the New England Dragway. And we have cars coming down our street at 40 miles an hour, sometimes 50 miles an hour. That's not an exaggeration. One time a car hit the curb, went over the curb, hit a tree, airborne, and just pretty much totaled the car. It was the middle of the afternoon, bunch of teenagers in the car. Thankfully, none of them were hurt. But it just is an indication of how fast cars go up and down the street, and not just cars, trucks, school buses, or whatever. So my concern is that this combination of 2 schools up the hill from us is going to bring just more traffic. And it's going to make what is now like a bad situation worse. It's nice in our neighborhood. We have a bunch of new families that have come in and live there with little kids. They can't go and play in their front yards. I used to play catch in the street with my sons. You know, and I think that it's just not the students, that number of students that are gonna be there, that's a concern. It's comments about like, you know, trying to use the school to do other community things. I'm sympathetic to the basketball needs. I ran the youth basketball program in this town for over 12 years. Both of my sons were on the varsity basketball team. But the idea that you wanna, you know, kind of make that into a satellite high school gym is just, it's not fair to the members of the local community in the neighborhood. So I would hope that you would have that as part of your priority as to how this school, and I'm all for, like, you know, us having the best schools in the Commonwealth and the needs of all of the kids that are in school now. My kids are already gone, but I understand the needs of the kids now. But I'd like you to also consider the impact of a large project like this would have on the local residents. Thank you.
I stole some of my thunder, but.
That's why I went.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Kraft. I live at 23 Westwood Street. And what I'm going to say is probably somewhat redundant to what you just heard, but I have you beat by a few years. I've been there since 1979. My concern is the increase in congestion by doubling the student population at the top of the street. I assume a doubling in teachers, a doubling in infrastructure as far as support, whether it's meals, custodians. Westwood is somewhat of a dangerous street. She wasn't lying on that. I've had conversations in the past with Officer Scipoletti, although I call him Bernie because I knew him in high school, stating if you wanted to increase the town coffers, set up a speed trap. There's been numerous speed traps on it, and unfortunately, it still has no effect. I can tell you, pulling out of my driveway on occasion, I had to hit the brakes because when I saw somebody coming down the street, the speed that I thought they were going was considerably faster. So I guess also too, being there since 1979, it's more of thinking that every school, so I'm a graduate of Burlington High School, and even prior to moving to Westwood Street, I actually went to Francis Wyman Middle School because I actually spent 2 years on the other side of town. So I know it well. Every school in Burlington was built on a major thoroughfare. Marshall Simons Memorial School on Wynn Street, Burlington High School, obviously on 3A, Francis Wyman on Terrace Hall, even the now gone Wildwood Elementary School, which was torn down several years ago on Route 62, Pine Glen on Route 62. Fox Hill is kind of an anomaly, is that it's actually in the northeast corner of Burlington where there's no thoroughfare. It comes out to be the end of Fox Hill Road and Westwood Street. My thought is it was never intended for have the capacity that is now talking about. I think it was 640 students, 2 to 3 stories. So my concern is student safety, but it's also residential safety. There are more older residents on the street. And my concern is that with that increase of number, the potential increases greatly of an accident and injury. So I hope that is taken somewhat in your consideration. Lastly, I understand the state money is very appealing. I get that. I work in the IT world in biotech in Cambridge, and my clients are clamoring for whatever state funding they can get. And I get it. Unfortunately, sometimes things are done which is based upon the money received. I would hope Burlington does what's best for Burlington and perhaps not what's best for the state and their regulations and have some limitations that sometimes come along with that money. All right, I thank you. Good night.
Hello, my name is Adam Heisler. I live on Vincent Road. My property abuts Fox Hill School property. And I want to thank you all for your time, talents, and treasures. You put a lot of effort into this project, and it is appreciated. Appreciate all the citizens that are showing up, both in person and online. And I commend everyone that voted, that took that poll, that put the education above the cost. Just as that previous person said, it's not always about the money. It's about the neighborhood, it's about the education, it's about the students. I had 4 kids that went through Burlington education. They went to Fox Hill School. And so I don't have any kids in the program, but I still voted, education is the most important thing. We already addressed a lot of the things that I was going to say. So they were great at discussing that. One thing, I've looked at some of the plans, and I know it's not set in stone yet. You still have a lot of options, but there's currently a nice mature forest between the neighborhood and the school, about 180 to 100 feet. And one of the designs, which was discussed, was having that parking lot come all the way down to the residents, the property, the residents on the southern side of the school. And there have been people, there's a professional surveyor out there with a GPS and a spray can, or spray paint, spraying the trees. So we're concerned that, they're already looking at cutting those trees down and putting that parking lot right up against the fence. I know it's not decided yet, but if possible, push that parking lot to the northern side of the property where there's not a neighborhood, right? So I know you're concerned about where the space is going to be, the vernal pool and all of that, but just consider the neighborhood where we don't want that parking lot right up against our property. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kim Shoebrooks. I live on Fox Hill. I know you're hearing a lot about the safety and all those concerns. And so I'm going to mix it up a little bit and talk about education. Education is very important. I'm here speaking to you as the mother of a child with special needs. So it's specifically special education. If our kids can't access the education, it all means stopping. My son started out Fox Hill School. I know we had the numbers up there of how much square footage and that we were told that was a robust special education program. I can say he's in 6th grade now. At the time he was there, he's in kindergarten and his reading program was out in the hallway. When he was having a rough day, he was either in the principal's office or in a conference room with whoever was available. I'm hoping that things changed in those 6 years, but if not, I don't really consider that a robust program. I know not everyone has those issues where they need that kind of help, but he was not able to make any progress on his IEP while he was there. So I think when we're talking about redoing the school, however we do it, a small school, a big school, we need to do better. We need to have space for those kids, particularly if we're going to merge 2 schools together. I don't think 3,000 square feet is enough, especially when you're bringing in staff, because a lot of that space is going to be allocated to the staff from Pine Glen. I think we need to think about things like if you have 600 kids all together, you're going to have more sensory issues. You're going to have more ADHD. You're going to get kids that were flying under the radar before and just managing to pull it together that now can't do that anymore. We ended up at Francis Wyman, and there they have quiet spaces. Like if you're having a rough time, they had like 2 counselors on call with walkie-talkies on their hips. They could be there in a moment. They could take the kids out. It's not a teacher that's leaving the classroom to have to deal with someone who's struggling. We need to have those spaces, particularly if it's a bigger school. We need to think about things like that. There's only so much that you can stagger lunches and recess and all of that. I was told at the time that there was really nothing they could do for us. There weren't any smaller classrooms. There were no aides. So there was no support. We need to do better. We need to have that support. Because if we don't, then our kids aren't learning, our schools aren't doing as well. So that's not great for our community either. And it also means that if they can't get the skills that they need, we're dumping them into the junior high school where the demands are higher and the supports are less. And that's a disservice to everyone. It's a disservice to the kids that are struggling, to the teachers that are trying to help them. And it's a disservice to the kids that aren't struggling, but don't have the teachers there to help them. So I just really think that that needs to be something that you're focusing on when you're designing these buildings. And I really honestly feel that a smaller school is better. But so I just needed to say my piece. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for your time. So I spoke,
Can you just say your name?
oh, sorry. My name is Katrina Boschetti. I live on 214 Fox Hill Road. So obviously, the impact on the neighborhood community is a huge issue for us. But I also spoke last time on safety for the school. I just want to speak on two things. One obviously is going to be safety because that's a huge thing. But the other is on the numbers. And I know that they tell us our numbers, but I also, I'm in real estate and I also have to take continuing education courses. And the other day, I thought this was very impactful. I'm not sure if you guys know about the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. But they are predicting that 400,000 new housing units, mostly multifamily, as many as they can fit of people, will be needed by the year 2040. So I don't know, I know that you guys go out the 10 years, but 2040 is really not even, it's like a little over that. So I could just kind of find hard, I don't know, the numbers where we're getting facts from one side and getting facts from you guys about the numbers coming in. And I know that the numbers are the numbers, but it's weird that we're hearing different things. So that's a question. Second, so safety is a huge issue for me. I know that everyone talks about our little snowflake school, which I 100% get that it does not fit our needs right now. But I believe that the architects who designed that school had one thought in mind, and that's the kids and the people in the school. And like I said last time, every room has an exit to the outside. Every center room, which is the gym or the cafeteria, is only feet from an outside exit. So when you're talking about multiple levels, you're talking about less safety for our children, regardless of whatever it is, a fire, a mass shooting, whatever it is. You guys are thinking that 5 to 10-year-olds during a fire are going to be calm. They're going to listen. That is not happening. They're going to be freaked out. They're not going to understand. So when you got a third floor, you're telling a 5 to 10-year-old, you know what? If something happens to me, don't worry about it. You guys just try to get outside. That is insane to me. Like if something was happened to their teacher and they can't figure it out, some of those kids are just going to curl up and freak out. So 3 levels, I don't think is it at all should be a decision based on safety alone for elementary school. I feel like you guys are going in thinking this is a high school, and it's not. This is an elementary school. These are little children who we should be thinking about first and foremost, which I'm really excited about all about your planning and the educational piece and everything like that. Is the first time I actually heard so much about that, which I really, really liked tonight. But all the other pieces just don't seem that you guys have children in mind. It's about the building itself and about, well, most schools are now 3 floors. Well, that's great, but this is an elementary school. It's not a high school. If you do a 640 plus 180 admins and teachers, that's, almost 1,000 people. That's pretty much almost this high school. So I don't understand where elementary school children's needs are coming first here, especially their safety, if something was to happen. So that is my really big concern. So, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Orfanos. I'm a Fox Hill parent. First time you see me, probably won't be the last. And actually, I want to comment on that. In some of our local reporting, a lot of the public comment was summed up as nostalgia, which is true, as many of you I know. But some of those comments I've made in the past in that nostalgia was really just, I think, fair warning. We're a really invested community. And as you can see tonight, we're here, we have a lot to say, and we're going to continue to be engaged and involved. And some of what I want to say about that is, as we look at all the options, I understand and respect we have to flesh out all those options as MSBA requires. Dr. Conti, I thank you for the educational programming. That was a lot of information tonight. It was really helpful for us as parents that haven't seen that piece of it. But when I look at these school options, these going to 3 elementary schools or 4, and I look at our surrounding communities, and I think about who are we as a community here in Burlington. And I'm also looking historically at all the conversations that have happened, because the first time I spoke on this matter was at school committee in 2019. And at that time, and this is where I have some questions and I want some clarifications, some of the quotes from that meeting, when I look back at those minutes, are the need is for more elementary classrooms, increasing student numbers, enrollment concerns at Francis Wyman with the construction on Corporate Drive. The intention is not to downsize staff. That's a concern that has been brought up yet, but I know a lot of parents have that concern. But all of this comes back to also just who we are as a community. When you look at any of our surrounding towns, none of them have a 3 elementary school model or a population of over 600 students at the elementary level. And I really think that going in that direction says who we are as a community. And are we a family-focused community that is about our children? And if we shrink down to a 3-school model, I think we're saying we're not. And frankly, personally, I'd be embarrassed to be a member of a community that is not family-focused and centered on the children. So I think if, as we spent a lot of time talking tonight about the educational program, that's hugely important. And I love that our community as a whole, yourselves included, is saying the educational benefit is top priority. It absolutely is. And I think we need to have continued conversations around the research that's out there about school size and educational benefit. And it is very clear that smaller school size is what is most educationally beneficial for our children. And I'd like to understand more about how we're addressing those needs. As another parent spoke about the needs of our special education population, that's coming into play here in a huge way. And I'm glad we're talking about the program at Pine Glen, and does it need to be spread across the district and other buildings? One of my questions is, what is the entrance criteria of that program? How are we addressing the needs for children on the spectrum that don't qualify for that program? That's not information I have. That's information I'd like to better understand, because there is not when your child, if you have a child with autism that doesn't fit that program, there isn't a program, and there isn't much out there for you to understand and know, how do I make sure my child's needs are being met? Thank you. So the last point I want to address also is equity. MSBA sounds like a great program, and getting that money is important. I understand that we need to be fiscally responsible, but I'm concerned that they are limiting us to the point where we cannot address our equity needs, that we have to look at the size of Francis Wyman and how that plays out across all the other elementary buildings, and balance our elementary schools equally and equitably. And I just don't want to see us limited by MSBA, where we don't make the decisions that are the best for our students. I want to thank you all for your time and your efforts in all of this, and your willingness to hear from all of us. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Carrie Callahan. I'm one of the Francis Wyman parents that people said they haven't heard from. I'm totally in favor for a 4-school plan. We pretty much at Francis Wyman have to always roll with the punches. There's been school start time, end time change. Oh, it'll go back after a couple of years. No, it hasn't. My daughter had a class of 17 kids, and that was great. It was awesome. However, Burlington didn't predict that the 2010 kids that were coming through for their kindergarten class were going to have such a huge number of kids that they ended up having to add another sixth kindergarten classroom at Francis Wyman. So on top of 5 classrooms already, because Burlington likes to have low numbers, we had to add another 6th classroom. And then in 3rd grade, they said, oh, that's it. We're gonna pull away the teacher, and my kid already has special needs, is gonna be kind of out of luck. And again, a higher class number. This is what's gonna happen again when we go down and build these schools and take away the one school that was, I'm losing my train of thought right now just because I'm not prepared. But these schools are gonna add more kids to the existing schools. And what happens to the kids with the special needs that need that extra help? Are they gonna be out of luck again? And, we already have so much congestion and traffic. We're talking about this bike lane on Cambridge Street, whatever. We need to take this into account that years from now, there's going to be more kids. People didn't see it in 2010, and now my son was in a class of 22, 23 kids, and that's not the Burlington way. And now, I don't know how much better his education could have been if he was in a smaller classroom. So I hope it's something that you all consider when you're considering these new schools.
Hi, I'm Sarah Shaw. I'm a Pine Glen parent. I live on Cutting Lane. I moved to Burlington a year and a half ago, and one of the reasons we moved to Burlington was for the school system. We heard great things about the school system. We researched, and it was one of the main reasons we moved here. My kids, I have 2 kids at Pine Glen right now. They walk to school. We live so close that it's right, quick walk for them. It's perfect. One of my questions is, with the combined school, what happens to that building? What is going to be the purpose of that right now? We go in the backyard, we hear the kids playing at recess. It's, so nice to sit out back there and, hear that. Is it going to be, apartments? Is it going to be another town building? What is going to be the purpose of that building? I'd like to know what the plan for that space is going to be, because obviously that could have a big impact on this property that I recently just purchased, and it'd be very important to me. The other thing that's really significant to me is the Pine Glen community. It's a small school, much smaller than the school we came from. And in the year and a half we've been here, we've really been welcomed in to that community. And I don't really understand the combined school model, how 2 schools in one building, how that would really work. Are they really separate? They're in the same building. How does that really function administratively, and kind of how that all functions? Like it doesn't really make sense to me to have 2 separate schools in one building. That's kind of obscure to me. But that community feels like it would be lost in the combined model, and that's been such a huge thing for me and my kids to really be welcomed into that community. There's so many events that are unique to Pine Glen that we've participated in, and have really helped us to kind of settle into that community and just quickly feel acclimated. My kids have made probably lifelong friends just really quickly, just settling into that community, and it's been really important. And I think that is a really valuable aspect that needs to kind of be articulated to the community, is how, if this combined model is going to be considered, how are those community and social aspects that are really important to the families and the kids going to be continued on? Thank you.
You heard me before, Erica Zola on Donald Road. Great info and details on the programming tonight, Dr. Conti. So appreciated that. We are very fortunate. I know from talking with other people in other communities, we are very fortunate with what we do offer here. So that is great. And it's undeniable that Fox Hill cannot be renovated, needs a new building. Got it. I'm going to speak again, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the traffic concern is real. I totally understand the models that have been put forth and the work and effort that's been put into that and the MSB constraints. I get all of that. But I still feel at my core, with even understanding everything that's been, and I've been following it as best I can, that 325 would be great. If it was 450, we know that's not on the table. So here we are. 325 still would be the best model for that neighborhood, as you heard from other community members already, with the uniquely situated area that it is. But my biggest concern with, if we do combine the models and we do the 640, even understanding the financial constraints and all of that, I just don't think the neighborhood can support it. Even if we were to add in sidewalks or add in crossing guards. Just today, when I spoke here last time, I had a perfect example where I had to stop traffic for, my son to cross. Happened again today. My son and his friend, who is also a neighbor, had stepped off the sidewalk. They had space to cross from Fox Hill onto Vincent. And parents that are picking up, or just traffic coming through, it was coming from the Fox Hill school. They did not stop. And again, I had to jump in front of the car with my arms out to get them to stop. And there was 2 other neighborhood children right behind my son and his friend who were also trying to cross. And I had to stand there and play crossing guard to allow them to cross. And I got the look from said driver as if, how dare I? How could I stop her from going down Fox Hill? And why should these kids be able to cross the street safely and walk home safely? We want to talk about safe routes to school, emissions, buses were taken away from our neighborhood for a while with COVID protocols. But children, and they say, well, put them back on the buses. My son, to take the bus, great that we offer that option, but they're home 20 minutes sooner if they walk. Why can't they walk? It should be safe for them to walk. So that is my greatest concern, that if we're almost doubling that traffic flow, you're going to even have that many more parents picking up, because you have activities that start at 3 p.m. after school. Pine Glen parents aren't going to all have their children take the bus home simply for the fact that there is a significant time difference between getting home from being picked up from school and from having to take the bus home when they have places to go after school. So that is, a major concern. I understand that there might be just some general change to the traffic flow of the neighborhood anyways, because if we do have, a larger gymnasium to host other, outside school, programs, I understand that. But another concern with the 2-school model would be, currently, as we all know, when we live in town, our schools offer a lot of great family events that are held after school hours, family festivals, things of that nature, ice cream socials, the list goes on. We're very fortunate for that. But if we have that 2-school model, or even if it's the one school at 640, or we can call it a Pine Glen Fox Hill at 640, you're also increasing your significant traffic flow in a tight-knit neighborhood. And I mean tight-knit in the sense of the way that the streets are navigated and situated. That then, you have parents coming at even increased times of the day when we're hosting, when the schools are hosting those festivals. So if it is the 2-school model, does Pine Glen have family festival this night and now Fox Hill has it this night, or things of that nature? It's just something to consider. I know you've heard it before, in regards to the traffic, but it's a true and real concern. It's not fabricated for the sake of not in my neighborhood. That's not where I'm coming from. I don't think that's where my community members are coming from. It really is a true concern in the unique location of that area. And that's just something to, to just really consider when we are narrowing these options. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.
And can I just have a quick clarification? I know you said hybrid for the July and September. Is just the September meeting that would be in the auditorium hybrid, or would both of those be hybrid?
The July meeting would just be
The virtual?
Virtual, yeah.
Okay. And the September one would be hybrid?
Yeah, I mean, that one's still to be scheduled, et cetera,
Right.
but that's the ideal.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the time. My name is Erica Sheehan. I live on Cresthaven Drive. For those of you that don't know, I've been a Burlington resident here for my whole life, but I've lived in the Fox Hill neighborhood for over 15 years. I actually lived on Fox Hill and I lived on Beaverbrook. So I can attest to what all of the community members are saying about the congestion. And I actually decided to move out of the Fox Hill neighborhood off of Beaverbrook Road because I have highly active children and I feared for their life on Beaverbrook. The cars go extremely fast. It is just so dangerous. I grew up there. I saw it as a child. I saw it as a parent. And now as a community member, I see it for all of my peers here. And I also recall my senior year here in high school. It was a very sad day. We lost a young resident in the town who was just chasing a basketball over by Simons Park. It was a cut through in town. It was a true accident and speed was not a factor. So I can't even imagine, knowing the speeds that people are driving in the Fox Hill neighborhood, that we are willing to increase the risk that we are putting in the neighborhood by considering adding more congestion to that area. The families of the Fox Hill neighborhood do not need to have that risk over their shoulder, just worrying about their kids walking home from school. I think we can all agree one loss of a child is far too many, and accidents, of course, are tragic, but we are already failing that neighborhood, in my opinion, and clearly in others, in terms of road safety. And these are our children, right? How many more cars are we adding? How much more risk are we willing to take by exposing them to that? But to shift to what I wanted to comment on is to actually talk about Pine Glen for a moment. I'm a proud graduate of Pine Glen School. I loved that school. I was even in there today for a meeting with the principal, and I got to hear the Pledge of Allegiance, and it was so heartwarming to be, this little girl was so proud of herself, and at the end she whispered, "Nailed it," when she finished, and it's like, and I know her, you know what I mean? Like, I know every kid in that school, and I just have two kids there. It's just such a special experience to be part of that. But I'm concerned because I noticed very few voices from Pine Glen here in the room and in the past couple of calls. So my question to all of you is to consider, how can we increase the awareness of this plan to our community members so that they can truly participate and attend and have their voices heard. I think I speak for a lot of the Pine Glen families when I say that this is actually a shock to us that we could be impacted. We understood years ago that a vote was taken and the school committee voted in favor of 4 schools. And, to this day, I'm unaware if that vote was rescinded, and I'm confused actually how we're even in a situation where that could be overridden, knowing that a vote was taken. Of course, I understand the MSBA rules require us to evaluate both school sizes now that we're in this process, but how can our community members walk away from this experience feeling like our school committee and the other governing bodies of our town stand by their word to the people of our community? How can we push back on this process to the MSBA and do what is right for our students and our community values? So with that, I encourage all of you to consider a broader effort to the community-wide engagement to ensure that all the voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Torres. I've been on Vincent Road, right around the corner from Erica, who spoke a little while ago, and I've been there for 40 years. What she talked about is a very real occurrence. It's probably once a week what she talked about occurs. All right, the traffic and the speed at which people are going to and from that school is way too fast. All right, you can put in all the sidewalks you want. The kids walk on the street. They cross the street. They cross over to people's lawns. I watch my 5 grandchildren during the week, and when it comes time to drop off and pick up, I have to put them behind my house. They will not be in the driveway. It is far too dangerous. It's really a dangerous situation. So, we don't have anything. I understand the educational needs are real, and I'm with it 100%. We have a lot of turnover in the neighborhood. There's a lot of children coming into the neighborhood. There's going to be a lot more walkers. Doubling the number of students plus administrators in that school, a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. I don't see this working without there being a disaster. Something bad's going to happen. And fortunately, Erica walks to and from school with her children every day. I mean, I've seen her stand in front of cars. It's not a safe situation. So you really have to consider the safety of the kids first and foremost. I understand the educational needs, but the safety to me is the highest thing you got to consider here. Thank you.
All set? Okay. We already talked about next meetings. Yeah, anything else? We all set?
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.